Revolutionary Girl Utena is a 1997 anime series directed by Kunihiko Ikuhara and produced at anime production studio JC Staff. Ikuhara and other creative leads on the series had previously worked on Sailor Moon at anime production studio Toei, and left Toei in pursuit of creative ideas that wouldn't fly in that environment, more on that later, ideas that would blossom into Utena. The show itself is about a girl named, wouldn't you know it, Utena Tenjo, who, in her childhood, met a mysterious purple-haired prince who comforted her and gave her a ring. That encounter inspired her to become a prince herself, and years later, at a special academy, the ring leads her to partake in supernatural events that mostly manifest as duels, the victor of which wins the hand of the Rose Bride. Utena is an explicitly queer and feminist text. To give you an idea of what this show has going on without diving too deep into the weeds, this show examines and critiques gender roles and the classic fairy tale constructs of princes and princesses. Utena herself strives to be a prince, traditionally a male-only role, and receives no shortage of comments on her boyish tendencies. She's both criticized by older conservative types who wish to uphold traditional roles, and complimented for her air quotes feminine side by creepy older exploitative types. And by types, I mean this creepy motherfucker right here. I hate him! What matters about Utena is that at the end of the day, she doesn't let those people and broader societal expectations define who she wants to be. She may break entirely away from traditional gender roles and the expectations laid upon her because of those roles, but that's fine, because she's comfortable and confident in who she wants to be. To say that Revolutionary Girl Utena was successful would be underselling it. Not only was the show well received upon its debut, it received the 1997 Best TV Animation Award at the Animation Kobe event, a distinction also shared by Neon Genesis Evangelion and Cowboy Bebop, but it has remained popular enough in the 2 decades since its release that it is still getting new home video releases and merchandise, and this year also saw the release of a new stage musical based on the show's second story arc. Thanks to both the show's popularity and director Ikuhara's prevalence in the anime industry, both he and the show have had an undeniable influence on modern anime. Collaborators on Utena, such as Shingo Kaneko and Takuya Igarashi, would go on to inject a little Utena into their future works, and Utena's influence can even be felt in modern Western animation. While I hesitate to make radical statements like Utena changed anime forever, without this show, anime today would certainly not look the same. Well, to be fair, one studio in particular might not look too different. Toei, after being left behind by Ikuhara, started producing the anime adaptation of One Piece, a cash cow which they will continue to milk until long after Oda has set down his pen, which may well be never. Toei could sit in its little big One Piece bubble forever, devoid of any other influence, and be just fine, but as it happens, they do have some other work, notably a long-running Magical Girl series with a production staff that routinely refreshes. The longer it goes on, the more new talent works on it, and who knows what they could have been influenced by. It's Utena. Go Princess Precure, the 12th season of Toei's long-running Precure franchise, was directly influenced by Revolutionary Girl Utena. It wears this influence on its sleeve. It's so obvious about it, and straight up just lifts enough elements from Utena, that I'm tempted to call this season Baby's first Utena. So, let's talk about that. Let me be clear up front, my goal is to not compare the relative quality of these two series, which executed on what element better, any of that sort of thing. That would be pointless because the answer is obviously Utena. No, my goal in bringing up these comparisons is to show how Go Princess Precure uses deliberate callbacks to Utena to set up similar thematic explorations before ultimately coming to different conclusions. Whichever show, whichever set of messages and themes resonates with any one viewer more strongly is up to personal taste, though again the answer is obviously Utena. Nevertheless, by setting up deliberate parallels, Go Princess practically invites comparison and discussion, So with that in mind, let's start at the start and first illustrate how, exactly, Go Princess Precure calls back to revolutionary girl Utena. Go Princess Precure opens on its main character, Haruka Haruno, as a child. She's alone and upset due to some bullies making fun of her dream of being a princess. Suddenly, a mysterious prince appears and comforts her, reassuring her that her dream is worth pursuing. He gifts her a mysterious key and leaves her inspired to follow her dream and become a princess. Years later, she enrolls at a fancy academy, and that very key leads her to become Cure Flora and do all the magic fighting that entails. In other words, Haruka Haruno has almost the exact same backstory as Utena Tenjo, and the first episodes of their respective series are very similar structurally. There's also a lot of visual callbacks. For example, the character design of this teacher who yells at Haruka is very, shall we say, reminiscent of this teacher who yells at Utena. Utena the series often had decorated borders and spinning roses in the corners of the screen as indicators of, well, many things. So too does Go Princess have spinning patterns adorn the corners whenever something noteworthy occurs, such as a character introduction. Between all that, it's safe to say that Go Princess Precure is deliberately calling back to, nay, invoking revolutionary girl Utena. But why? When you get down to it, Go Princess's messages and themes skew hard away from Utena's. Go Princess Precure embraces and celebrates the tropes it employs, the very same tropes that Utena would critique. So why would Go Princess Precure deliberately invoke what's effectively its thematic opposite? Before I speculate on that, let's get a handle on what exactly Go Princess has to say about princes and princesses. Haruka's dream, as she often repeats throughout the season, is to become a princess. This dream is framed unambiguously as a good thing, a dream she should want to chase and fulfill. And it's important to recognize what inspired Haruka to chase that dream: a children's book. Her inspirational figure is a fairy tale princess. Now here's some news for you. The classic fairy tale princess sucks! Whether it be as a trope or as an ideal to live up to. Hell, not just princesses, women in general didn't have it that great in fairy tales. Quote, fairy tales embody the ways that societies attempted to silence and oppress women by making them passive. Much of the fairy tale literature reinforces the idea that women should be wives and mothers, submissive and self-sacrificing. Good women in stories are to be silent and passive without ambition, beautiful and eager to marry, end quote. This often manifests as a lack of autonomy for women and princesses. Look at Sleeping Beauty, cursed to eternal slumber and some prince she doesn't even know has to come wake her up. And Snow White, cursed to eternal slumber and some prince she doesn't even know has to come and wait a minute.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. Intel has told us there are at least 7.
Okay, I already see one. Give me. Okay.
They're the same picture.
So to bring this back, Go Princess Precure has Haruka chasing a dream based on outdated ideas that would see her stripped of her autonomy and freedom, left only with pretty dresses and vague platitudes. And that sucks. Utena recognized and criticized all that, and Go Princess calls back to Utena yet doesn't repeat or even agree with its criticism, seemingly. So what then? Is Go Princess Precure honestly saying that it's okay for Haruka to chase an ideal that would see her subjugated and stripped of her autonomy, and by proxy, is it encouraging actual real human children to do the same? Thankfully, no. Go Princess Precure also recognizes the faults in these classic tropes, and even goes so far as to illustrate them. Episode 47 sees Haruka trapped in a dream world and living out the classical princess life. It comes with all the expected niceties. The big castle, the doting prince, all the aesthetic elements are there, and so are all the classic failings. All Haruka has to do here is smile, look pretty, and be happy. Otherwise, she doesn't have to do anything and is actively prevented from working for anything. She is robbed of her autonomy, while the prince and her servants do all the work for her. In other words, she's the perfect princess. And that sucks. And the show knows it, and she knows it. She rejects this fairy tale life, saying, in fact, Go Princess Precure pretty much reinvents what it means to be a princess. It does so through the motto repeated at the start of every opening: strength, beauty, kindness. The characters don't just automatically have these traits, they have to work hard to achieve them. And strength and a good work ethic are just about as far as you can get from the expectations of classical princesses. Indeed, Haruka's dream of becoming a princess most often manifests in the show as her working hard to achieve just the slightest bit of progress and still being happy about it, sending the message that the best dreams are those you're passionate about, those that you have to work hard to obtain. It's a journey, not the destination sort of deal. Haruka's dream is a grand one because she works to obtain it, and chasing it brings her happiness. Being a princess in this show is not about any of the classical elements, it's about working hard and being a better person for it. So while in the end the classical trappings of princessliness are rejected by Haruka, and thus by the show itself, the dream of being a princess is still fully intact, a wholly good thing to be striving for. Now why is that? Well, I have an idea, but be warned, this answer will involve some speculation. Because we gotta sell toys! Being the extravagant multimedia franchise that it is, Precure makes most of its money through the sale of merchandise. Not just DVDs and Blu-rays of each season, but soundtrack CDs, dolls of the various characters, and especially toys fashioned after whatever magic items the characters employ in any given season. If you've ever wondered why every season has the girls using some very out-of-place looking plastic doohickeys as magic weapons, this is why. To sell them. What's important here is the target demographic. Young girls not yet old enough to have their own disposable income, which means that the money here really comes from the parents of said girls, and as with any show made first and foremost to sell toys to little girls and unwitting parents, the executives who pay for all this are going to want to prioritize and force into the show whatever they think will sell well to that group. Now, picture these executives, all old and middle-aged men, together in a conference room brainstorming what they think little girls want. What do you fucking know was the first thing out of their mouths?
I'm looking at you, Steve!
They, of course, fell back on demographic stereotypes to push their toys, because, of course, all girls must love princesses, right? In other words, Go Princess Precure is unavoidably tied up in the aesthetic elements of fairy tale princesses because that's what someone at Toei thought would sell. And given how poorly this season did in terms of sales, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that was a bad call. And you know what else? Kunihiko Ikuhara, that glorious bastard, saw this coming 2 decades ago.
Disclaimer. I do not claim to actually know Ikuhara's mind here, I'm just weaving a narrative.
Remember that before he worked on Revolutionary Girl Utena, he worked at Toei on Sailor Moon, Toei's other well-known long-running magical girl franchise that made a butt-ton of money off merchandise sales. Ikuhara and company left Toei and made Utena to explore ideas they couldn't under the umbrella of Sailor Moon, re-examining some of the tropes that were employed in Sailor Moon and especially the classical notions of princes and princesses. In other words, Revolutionary Girl Utena was a criticism of everything Toei was trying to sell. Ikuhara and his collaborators couldn't weave those elements into Sailor Moon. After all, it'd be weird of a show to say, hey, princes and princesses are kinda stupid, only for executives to turn around and then try to sell toys of princes and princesses from that same show like they were objects of desire. So Ikuhara and company went and made their own show so they could do whatever they wanted, and it's still successful 20 years later. Toei then, nearly 2 decades later, used many of the same narrative elements that Utena used for criticism to instead say, no, princesses are good, actually.
Please buy our princess toys.
In that way, Go Princess Precure can itself almost be read as a rebuke of the ideas and criticisms of Utena. After all, Go Princess used a few of the narrative elements of Utena to come to almost the opposite conclusions and try to sell exactly what Utena criticized. Go Princess declared Utena to be wrong, arguing that, of course girls should love princesses, watch as they buy all our toys. Because while in some ways Go Princess and Utena agree about how the classical ideas of princesses kind of suck, Go Princess can't divorce itself from the aesthetic elements. The grand dresses and the medieval castles and the high society life, because of course, girls will always love those and they will always sell. And then Go Princess Precure went on to become the worst selling season of Precure in terms of merchandise sales, so, I think Utena had it right. Now let me clear something up. None of this is me making value judgments. I could not give less of a rat's ass whether any one person was attached to or even found meaning in the aesthetic elements of princesses, nor do I take issues with the ideals that Haruka pursues. If anything, they're admirable. I just think that it's incredibly funny where Utena criticized the whole concept of princes and princesses 20 years ago, ultimately rejecting those labels outright in favor of one searching for their own identity. Go Princess Precure, while still recognizing those criticisms, still tried to push princes and princesses as a still relevant and merchandisable concept and, according to the numbers, failed utterly. Another clarification, this season was not a failure on the narrative front, or hell, even as a season of television. I liked it a lot. Hell, it's probably my second or third favorite season, and we're going to discuss some other narrative elements in a bit, just, I think conceptually, making significant references to Utena while failing to understand and reflect on that show's core messages was a poorly conceived marketing strategy, and I mean, I don't blame them. Utena's dense enough that even I don't understand it half the time, and I've seen it twice now. So in the end, while Go Princess Precure was highly and intentionally reminiscent of Revolutionary Girl Utena, by rejecting some of Utena's core ideals, Go Princess ended up being a little confused thematically and a light failure financially. Revolutionary Girl Utena recognized and perhaps facilitated changing cultural perceptions of gender norms, challenging what it even means to be a boy or girl, and concluding that girls can and should pursue dreams beyond the shackles of gender norms and the men who would keep them tied into those norms. Go Princess Precure, for existing in a time where those gender norms have since shifted, falls back on those same norms to sell toys. But hey, this show's got a lot more going on than references to a 20-year-old show that was the last noteworthy contribution JC Staff made to the anime scene. Boom! Okay, that was mean. I'm sorry, JC Staff. Go Princess has some ideas and thematic elements that are kind of unique to it. So let's talk about those for a bit. The big thematic focus this season is on dreams. Each of the four main characters have their own dream and work throughout the season to achieve them. But there's more to each of these dreams than what's on the tin. Indeed, they all have their own unique thematic undertones. And by undertones, I mean overtones, because Precure is rarely subtle. So, we're gonna take a look at them all in turn. First up is the dream of the main character, Haruka Haruno, becoming a princess. Well, we've actually already discussed this dream earlier, so I'll just briefly recap it here and recontextualize it a little, I guess. Haruka and her dream represent perseverance. While all the characters face some manner of hardship, Haruka is the one who has to face and overcome the most challenges in pursuit of her dream. Unlike the others, she isn't starting out with any advantage. She wasn't born into wealth, and isn't already deep into her career or anything. She isn't even notably book-smart. Along the way, people will make fun of her dream, she'll struggle to overcome her clumsiness during her air-quotes princess lessons, and she'll even have the prince who originally inspired her betray her.
Hey, would you look at that? Another fucking Utena parallel!
All she has going for her is the ability and determination to work hard. So Haruka's story about wanting to become a princess is actually about the value of hard work, of putting in the effort to achieve something you desire. A dream is valuable not just because you want it, but because you're willing and able to put in the effort to pursue it. And eventually achieving that dream is satisfying because of that work. So chase your dreams, kids. Chase them hard. Among the main characters, Minami Kaito is unique in that her dream changes. But in order to talk about any of that, let's talk about Minami in general for a bit. She was born into wealth. There's a classic princess thing for you. Her parents run the Kaito Group, which, as far as I can tell, is a powerful business conglomerate which does stuff. I don't know, the show never defines it too clearly. It's just a vague, big business with a lot of money. Anyway, Minami is expected to become a part of the Kaito Group one day because nepotism. And for a while, that's her dream. She wants to join her family business to help people, make a positive impact on the world, which is unusual for someone in her position, but hey, more power to her. Like everyone, she's open about this dream, and her parents are proud of her, and look forward to the day she joins them and helps them consolidate even more power. They even invite her to social events so she can get acquainted with all their business partners and get a foot in their world, so to speak. Good parenting, I guess? But she's only able to do all that because of her parents. She's never really known another life. Never had cause to want after something else. Her parents are cool and she wants to be like them, and they're proud of her for having and pursuing that dream, and they let her know, only mentally reinforcing for her the idea that that dream is something she should want and pursue. It makes them happy. She thinks it makes her happy. Why bother thinking of anything different? Well, she never had to bother because something different found her. In episode 36, Minami attends one of her family's rich people get-togethers on their big-ass cruise ship, because of course they own one of those, and during this event she meets Asuka Kitakaze, a marine biologist who works as a veterinarian at a local aquarium. Around this time, we also learn that Minami has always had a fascination for the sea and sea life, so when she shadows Asuka and watches her care for the sea life at the aquarium, within Minami, a little flame is lit. One that she tries to douse and suppress because it runs against the core of who she thought she was. Eventually, though, she realizes she can't deny the truth, either to herself or to her family. Meeting Asuka made her realize that she had a passion for the sea and the life therein, and that she desired to know and care for that life more than anything else. She had a new hero to serve as her inspiration, not because she grew up in an environment where she had little else to influence her, but because it was something that she felt she could chase for no other reason than she wanted to. She finally realized that she wanted to be Jotaro Kujo. And it is in this change of heart that we get to the heart of Minami's story, the fear of coming out. Up until this point, not only was Minami's dream to be a part of her family's business, but she had constructed her entire identity around that dream. And now that dream was gone. Finding her true self and accepting that self was easy enough, relatively speaking anyway, but what would her family think? They had only ever known the girl who was going to join them one day, perhaps even molded her into being that person and expected her to always be that way. Having learned that her true self was different from what even Minami knew herself to be, Minami feared that she would be rejected by her family simply for being different. And honestly, that's not an unfounded fear. Sure, it'd be easy enough to say that you should always trust your family and that your family will always love you, but that's just not how reality works. In reality, her fear is very justified. Think of how many horror stories you've read of young kids coming out to their families as gay or trans and then being disowned or sent to some fucking anti-gay conversion therapy bullshit. In real life, people are far too often rejected and stigmatized just for being honest to their loved ones about who they are. So while Minami's situation isn't comparable in terms of potential negative consequences, the fear itself is sadly very, very real. So what I take from this is that it takes real courage to disclose a deep part of yourself, even to loved ones. Minami demonstrated that courage and was lucky enough to have a family that accepted her for who she was. If only reality were so kind. Kirara Amanogawa's dream is to become a world-renowned model, and she is unique among the main cast in that at the start of the show, her career is already well underway. Somehow, she's already a working model with a packed daily schedule, partaking in all sorts of photo shoots and runway shows. In other words, she's closer to achieving her dream than anyone else. And she's too far along to stop now. She's like Minami in that her inspiration for her dream was a parental figure, in this case her mother. Like Minami once wanted to work with her parents, Kirara wants to work with her mom. Unlike Minami, however, she sticks to her dream, and sticks to it so hard that she develops tunnel vision, too narrow a focus on her dream and herself. And that leads to the best comedic twist of the early episodes, so let's set the stage a little. Haruka and Minami got their powers first, and Kirara was the last to awaken the magical girl within her. She kicks some serious ass, but once the dust has settled and Haruka excitedly welcomes her to the mission, Honestly, that's one of the funniest moments in the entire show, but more importantly, it works to establish Kirara as an affable yet fiercely independent girl who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to express herself. Though naturally she eventually decides that she does in fact want to do the Precure thing, she never lets that duty interfere with her dream. Her schedule remains jam-packed, and she's often seen hurrying to finish up a fight so she can run off and not be late for a photo shoot. In other words, she constantly struggles to balance her dream with her duty, and her greatest personal conflict emerges when she is forced to choose between the two. We all have our dreams, and ideally, if it would make us happy, we should all have the chance to pursue them. But realistically, there are all sorts of external factors beyond our control that may prevent us from pursuing our dreams. Some of us will be born into poor socioeconomic situations that close countless doors in life, such as higher education. Others will have to make hard choices and sacrifices just to make ends meet. For instance, a sudden medical bill might force someone to choose between paying their mortgage and eating, because we live in a capitalist hellscape. For Kirara, this hard choice manifests as either keeping on her current upward career path or putting it on a years-long hold just to do her duty and save a friend. And even if you haven't seen the season, you know what she chose. She did her duty. Now, this choice is important because it shows how Kirara has grown since the early episodes. At first, she didn't even consider joining up with Haruka and Minami and doing the Precure thing to save the day because it might have interfered with her job and thus her dream. In other words, she chose her dream over her duty. Nearly 40 episodes later, she makes the opposite choice. Despite valuing her dream no less, she puts it on hold to uphold her duty. From that action, we can see that she's grown out of her tunnel vision, learned to value the lives and dreams of others. How good would she feel if she achieved her dream only through the sacrifice of others? Not very good, I'd wager. Through protecting the dreams of others throughout the season, she's learned that everyone else's dreams are just as valuable and just as worth protecting and chasing after. And if she can help to protect those dreams, if she knows it's her duty to do so, then she would be no better than the bad guys if she let one wither away just to chase hers a little more. Sure, she may have sacrificed significant progress toward her dream, but in saving one, she protected a whole lot more. At the end of the season, Kirara still pursues her dream with a fervent passion that borders on obsession, but in learning to be less self-absorbed, she valued finding and protecting that same passion in others. Last up is Poha Kaki, the surprise fourth member of the crew, and she's the princess of this season's Desolate Magic Kingdom, because apparently that's the thing we're doing every season now. And her dream is... hang on, the fuck was it again? To be a princess? But that was Haruka's, and she already... no, wait. It's to be a grand princess, right? That clears it up. Wait, being a grand princess is something that everyone in this season sets out to achieve, and they do, because that's the ultimate final form of their Precure powers, which they use to save the world. So, what the fuck is Toa's deals again? Okay, aside from being a grand princess, Toa doesn't have anything unique going on dream-wise, which is kind of messing with my whole framework of discussing dreams here, so instead what we're going to do is use Toa as a bridge to this season's other big thematic through line, hope versus despair. Toa is the princess of the very appropriately named Hope Kingdom. Or at least she was until she was lured away by the baddies. She was more or less brainwashed into becoming someone who spreads despair, and without her, her kingdom did indeed fall into despair and was easily toppled by the baddies. Put simply, the Princess of Hope became the Princess of Despair. Toa was the first person in this narrative to be overcome by despair, and was in turn the first to overcome it. But how does one overcome despair? Toa had been under the influence of the big bad for so long that the question of whether she was just brainwashed or had truly started to believe what was fed to her was, for once, ambiguous. Even isolated from the big bad's influence, Toa was still deep into despair and couldn't pull out of it on her own. She needed a helping hand. Haruka's hand, to be precise. Toa's liberation illustrates how separation and solitude, how being forcibly removed from familiar surroundings and family and friends, can amplify negative emotions. Toa lived in a land that personified hope, and when that was taken from her, what was she left with? She was just a shell of her former self who could only claw away at whatever remained of her past self. If hope couldn't save her, why cling to any of it? Better to just tear it all away. And indeed, hope alone could not save her. More than anything, it's the song that Haruka plays, a song she struggled endlessly to learn, that's Toa's bridge back to the light, the spark of hope that lets her claw her way out of despair. Hope might not be an easy thing to come by, but you can find it if you look. Toa found hope not just in the memory of good times long since past, memories brought about by that very song, but in the idea that she could reclaim what she thought was lost, an idea she had to carry out with her own two hands. See, hope isn't just a flimsy concept, not an emotion you can cling to and make everything work out. Hope, like many a good thing in the season, is born from hard work. Haruka once heard a beautiful song and hoped she could play something so lovely herself one day. Fueled by that desire, she started practicing hard. As she kept practicing and got better, she hoped and willed herself to keep at it, and eventually got good enough that she could use that same song to spark hope back into Toa. So hope never exists in isolation. It can inspire and feed us, and our hard work can, in turn, produce in us more hope, creating a cycle of positivity. Toa would use that hope to work hard and restore hope to her kingdom, thus continuing that cycle. That's all to say, hope can mean a lot. It can be a fuel and a goal, and if we carry just a little of it with us, it might take us farther than we ever expected. And make no mistake, just a little hope can go a long way. Just look at Yui Nanase. Though not a Precure herself, she's very much a part of the main cast, a friend who's in on all the magic stuff, and her little spark of hope was just as powerful as any of the main girls. As a side note, I really enjoyed Yui's character for what she represented for Precure in terms of storytelling possibilities, despite her screen time being limited compared to the main cast. The bulk of most Precure seasons are dedicated to fleshing out and spending time with the main characters. You know, like literally every story ever, but time is rarely spent on the girls' social circles outside of their Precure buddies. Often it seems like the only people these girls know is their family and the friends they do the magic fights with. Which is, you know, fine, but if that keeps up for too long, it can start giving off the impression that these girls lead relatively insular lives. Thankfully, here we have Yui Nanase to alleviate that issue. She's a core part of this group of friends despite not being involved in the magic fights, allowing her to serve as the normal one, per se, that keeps the group grounded. But also, and here's what I really like, she's in on the secret. Usually being a cure is meant to be kept secret no matter what, to the point that numerous absurd contrivances will occur to keep it secret, and if the secret is ever revealed, it's only during the finale to up the stakes. Again, that's all fine, aside from the contrivances. God, I cannot begin to describe how frustrating it was in the original season where the girls were often in danger of being found out, but it was okay because whatever onlookers ended up just passing out just at the right time, and it happened so fucking often, like, you could make a drinking game out of it and be hospitalized. Fuck, what was I saying? Right, so while it's fine to keep the secrecy as the status quo, after a while I start craving something just a little bit different, and that's what Yui Nanase is, a little bit different. By being a non-magic friend of the magic fighters who's aware of the magic stuff, she can both control the normal people when the magic fights break out, which is convenient for the scriptwriters, and act as an anchor for the main characters, a normal friend they can confide in about a big part of their lives they otherwise would have to never speak of. I guess, technically, What's-His-Fuck and Happiness Charge fulfill the same role, but, I mean, we all know how well that turned out now, don't we? Anyway, tangents over. Back to Yui Nanase and Hope. Yui was the first victim of the baddies, the first to have her dream locked away and turned into a monster, and she's the only one to whom this happens multiple times. Like, it happens often enough to the point that it's comedic, like, whoops, she got caught again, that's our Yui. Regardless, having Yui get, kidnapped multiple times ends up being more than just a cheap plot device. Rather, it builds up to something a little bigger. After being caught the first time and being let in on the secrets, she has the benefit of knowing exactly how the baddies operate, and knowledge is half the battle. Armed with that knowledge, she's able to start resisting the baddie's magic all on her own. Granted, she's not fully successful until the very end, but she pulls through when it matters most. Because she knows that the baddies amplify and exploit despair, she knows what she has to hold on to fight it. Hope. During the finale, her hope is the key that saves not only her, but numerous innocents caught up in the mess, and even the main girls themselves. She may not have any magic powers, but she shows that you don't need any to make a meaningful difference in the world. You just need a bit of hope and the will to give that hope to others. So the concept of hope took on many different forms this season, from a motivator to a reward, but the same cannot be said for its converse, despair. In fact, what's most notable about the despair of Go Princess Precure is that it's pretty much just recycled storytelling. To set the stage a little, this season's villains were all about despair, the big bad was named for the concept.
All I wanna do is see you turn into a giant woman,
And her henchmen all created despair by stealing people's dreams. Side note, this henchman, Shut, is fabulous, and I love him. Anyway, at the end of the day, the baddies are defeated not by punch-fisting them, but by accepting that despair is a part of the human experience and learning to live with it alongside hope. Now, does that sound familiar or what? If you'll recall, Sweet's villain was the embodiment of sorrow, so it was more or less the same thing. The lesson there and here is that whatever negative emotion they're talking about is an inherent part of the human experience, and we have to learn to live with it, because without the negative, we can't have the positive. Without sorrow, we can't have happiness. Without despair, we can't have hope. And happiness/hope is, of course, worth having, so with despair, Go Princess Precure isn't saying anything that the past seasons haven't already said, which, oh well. Something I realize I talk about surprisingly little during these videos is the action. At least I never really go in depth. I suppose you could say that's because I'm more familiar with examining stuff like character themes, story structure, stuff like that, and while I appreciate Precure action as much as the next gal, I've never been confident that I have the proper language or knowledge to describe why any season or episode's action scenes worked. And hell, maybe I still don't have that knowledge or language, but that's not going to hold me back this time, because let me tell you, this season's action was hype as fuck. Seriously, though action in general is a part of the franchise's broad appeal, this season's consistently amazing action animation was one of its standout features, and the action in the first few episodes in particular was the primary reason this season hooked me as hard as it did, you know, aside from all the Utena stuff. So let's try to break some of this down, shall we? Right now, I'm going to examine in brief the fight from Episode 1, both to extol the virtues of its animation and to see how it uses that animation to tell its story. The first important details happen even before the fight starts. We've got Haruka backing up out of fear of the monster, but even without audio or seeing her face, I bet you can see the moment she finds her courage and decides to fight. Did you see it? Let's play it again. There. Just by planting her feet in the ground and planting them firm, Haruka entirely shifts the momentum of the scene. Previously, the camera, the scene, had been following the villains as they wreaked havoc. They were in control, pushing Haruka ever back, and the camera followed them accordingly. But now that Haruka's stopped running, so too has the camera stopped backing up. By halting the backwards momentum and refocusing on Haruka's movements, the camera is telling us that she's now in control. Following that, we get our obligatory magical girl transformation sequence, and then a shot where the camera spins around a 3D model of Haruka, which looks, fine, if a little out of place. Okay, time to step back for a moment. Time for a tangent. CG animation has been getting increasingly prominent in Precure over the last few seasons. It started with just being used for ending dance sequences, but now it's blossomed into being used for those special attacks that are recycled every episode. I know some people take ire with the integration of CG into otherwise 2D works, and I occasionally do too, but in Precure's case I'm usually fine with it. It helps that Precure usually only employs it during the parts I care least about or are otherwise divorced from the main affair. Like, the recycled attacks are cool once, then I stop paying attention, and the end credits have a good excuse for looking different because the show's over, and any way they decide to experiment with the animation doesn't interfere with what most people turn up for. It also helps that Precure CG animation is genuinely not bad. Integrating CG with 2D animation usually only results in whiplash when the CG doesn't visually match up with the rest of the series. Think the dragon in Dean's Day Night. After all, when 2D and CG animation is carefully integrated, no one usually notices and everyone is fine with it. For instance, 2D animation is sparingly used to accentuate Hoseki no Kuni's 3D style, and CG is often used in the pre-visualization process to help 2D animators animate, like in all the UFO table things. See the latest video by the Kanapa Effect for more on that. Go Princess Precure CG animation isn't nearly as smoothly integrated as Hoseki, but the CG never interferes with the action and isn't otherwise ugly, so I ain't about to complain. Plus, man, the second ending is actually, well...
Fire. Everything about that video is perfect.
That, but unironically. Alright, back on track. After the transformation, Haruka, now Cure Flora, is now in control of the scene. Even through her confusion, she jumps in the air, she falls on her ass, she does the fast punch, and the camera is with her the whole way, only pulling away from her as a reaction to her action. Now that she has the power to fight for what's right, protect dreams and what have you, she's in control of both the situation and the scene. And all of that is what we in the industry call competent filmmaking. Okay, I lied, I'm not in the industry, I'm just an idiot on the internet. And shit, we haven't even gotten to the real action yet. Now okay, we can she's gotta do a pose. They can recycle every episode because this is a TV anime on a production schedule tighter than the force used by the IRS to squeeze the life out of the poor. Okay, now we can really start. And let's play it for a bit.
What the fuck?
Where do I even begin? That's fucking amazing. Ah, okay. Like, just based on the rule of cool, this is already a 10 out of 10. The long, unbroken cut of just Flora running is impressive in and of itself. The animators had to keep track of not only her running and dodging, but also the incoming projectiles and subsequent explosions, and that it all just keeps happening in the same uncut frame. It's just like, fuck, it's exciting. And then she jumps in the air and does a punch, and this punch is especially effective because it gets multiple reactions. First, we see her fist fly in, then the hit connects, and the pallet breaks, causing a shockwave which takes just a second to register. Then boom, that shockwave kicks up a bunch of pedals, crowding the screen even more, coupled with the accompanying sound effects. All that sells the punch as the damn hard one, and then the scene just keeps going. Seriously, it's almost a full minute of non-stop action with just as much detailed and high-energy animation. It's fucking amazing is what it is. To give credit where it's due, this first episode's action scene was probably key animated by Shingo Fuji, who is not a stranger to Precure, having previously contributed to Happiness Charge. Commenters on Sakugaboru have noted his excellent footwork. He's apparently also well known for doing slides, and also consistently providing kinetic high-energy animation, so hats off to him. So why'd I bother with that extended breakdown of just one action scene? Well, I think that scene is illustrative of how the season as a whole handles its action. Sure, it's not all 100% as amazing as that was, but a lot of it is damn close, and some of it's even more exciting. As a whole, all the action scenes in Go Princess Precure managed to be kinetic and exciting, and Episode 1's action scene was just the first of many. Oh, let's calm down for a second. Here's another thing. I cannot say why, but some of my favorite animation in the whole season is that bit in every transformation sequence where the girls do a little bow. What tickles my fancy so... I don't know, the fluidity of a simple movement being helped along by being animated on 2s or 1s, or the billowing dresses and hair. All I know is I look at this and think, damn, cartoons are fucking cool. And really, if I can just look at something and think nothing but that's fucking cool, then I think that, in and of itself, makes that thing worth being. To close off, I want to try to tie some of what we've discussed back into Revolutionary Girl Utena. Both Utena and Go Princess Precure, like many stories aimed at kids and young adults, can broadly be labeled as coming-of-age narratives. I don't care for that term too much, honestly. I think it's been applied to such an insane variety of stories that its meaning has become muddled, but it nevertheless holds true. Go Princess Precure was largely about the cast finding and pursuing their life passions, their dreams. Revolutionary Girl Utena was less concerned with the characters finding and pursuing any particular dream, but still, the ending of both the show and the film have the main characters attaining the freedom necessary to live their lives as they see fit, whether that be in pursuit of dreams or love. Go Princess Precure is unique among Precure seasons in that it shows the main characters as adults long after the conclusion of the main story. They're all doing what they dreamed of. Minami's researching sea life, Kirara's off being famous in Paris, Toa still exists, and Haruka, well, what about Haruka? Minami and Kirara's dreams led them to careers, but all Haruka dreamed of was being a princess, and I don't know anyone writing a paycheck for that. Unlike the others, we don't know what Haruka does with her life, and that's okay because Go Princess Precure was never about that. It was about dreams, about having the freedom to pursue them. At the end of Revolutionary Girl Utena, Anthy Himemiya, the Rose Bride, the girl without freedom, the girl whose life has been controlled by her brother and the system he created, chooses to leave. A girl who hasn't made a choice for herself in perhaps an inhumanly long time does just that, and she doesn't know what's ahead of her. Her brother's system, being the Rose Bride, the school, it was all familiar, and maybe there was a certain comfort in that, but it deprived her of her freedom. By leaving all that behind and stepping out into the unknown for the first time in forever, Anthy was free to pursue her desires, her dreams, whatever those may be. We, may not know exactly what's ahead of her, but that's okay because whatever's on the path ahead of her, that's the path she chose to walk. A similar reclamation of freedom can also be read into the movie, this time with both Anthy and Utena driving off into the sunset together, away from the controlling system and into whatever future they can make for themselves. And that too is what we do with Haruka Haruno. Her future is uncertain. We don't know what she's going to do with her life, but that's okay because she has the freedom to chase after whatever she desires, and she spent the entire season fighting for that freedom, both for others and for herself. Where the villains would have locked someone's future away, she stepped in and protected that future, protected people's ability to chase their dreams. So too did she do that for herself. With the last battle, with her last speech to the villain, she secured the freedom to pursue one's dreams both for the world and especially for herself. We don't know what her future holds, nor do we know what it holds for Anthy and Utena, but we do know they're free. They fought hard against oppressive systems and opened the door to the future wide open. They all earned the freedom to pursue their dreams, and whatever those may be, we know they'll chase after them. Thanks for sitting through my extended ramblings about a children's magical cartoon show. I too don't quite know what my future holds. Maybe a viewer's choice, maybe more Symphogear. Definitely Trails of Cold Steel 3, holy shit, the hype. I'm probably already playing that when you're watching this. But regardless, I know I've got good times ahead. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. Given the things I've said in this video, I expect at least a couple of essays. Oh, and actually share this video around, maybe? I don't usually ask for that, but I think I might have accidentally said one or two maybe kind of smart things this time? I don't know. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks again for watching, and be gay, do crime.